Right, thank you. I'll start the meeting. Welcome to the Planning Application Committee meeting Monday, the 28th of October, here at the Civic. Um, I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting who's in the room and those who are observing the meeting on Microsoft Teams, I should say. Fire alarm procedure. There are no fire drills expected this evening, so in the event of an alarm sounding, please quickly make your way out of the building. There are 3 exits from this room which members can use to vacate the premises. Switch mobile phones onto silent or switch them off, and if you do get any calls, take them outside the meeting room. Do not leave any possessions unaccompanied and/or report any unaccompanied possessions. Remember to take any possessions with you when you leave the meeting at its conclusion. This meeting may be subject to filming or audio recording by others in accordance with the Council's filming protocol. Anyone who remains in the meeting following this announcement will have deemed to have consented to allow their image to be recorded and broadcast. Thank you. I'll move on to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, please?
We do, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Abbs, Councillor Metcalfe and Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Stevenson to be substituted by Councillor Swinscoe.
Thank you. Are there any other apologies from the floor? Thank you. Move on to item 2, declarations of interest. Councillor Bell. Thank you. Any other declarations? I have one myself. Item 5. I know the applicant and I also supply the chip shop with pies, so I'll leave the meeting and Charles will take over as chair for that item. No other declarations? No? Thank you. Move on to agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of September. We have a proposer and seconder for those minutes. Councillor Bell. Councillor Tempest Mitchell.
Chair.
Yes.
I've noticed I was present at the last meeting, but I've not noticed in attendance.
Can that be recorded as a matter of accuracy?
Chair.
Are there any other matters of accuracy? No. Subject to any amendments for accuracy, could I put the minutes of the meeting on the 30th to the vote by show of hands? All those present, give it. Thank you. Any abstentions? Any against? And there we are. Right, thank you. The minutes have been approved. Moving on then with application item number 4, which is planning application reference 2015-0083 NT, outline application with all matters reserved for up to 35 dwellings, Balmoral Drive, Mansfield. I'll allow Councillor Bell to leave the room. Could I invite the officers to present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to provide some background context, there's quite a number of updates to this application. Just to briefly outline the application. So it's an outline application with all matters reserved for the construction of up to 35 dwellings. The recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to a Section 106 agreement. So just before I go into the main presentation, there are a number of updates that the committee should be aware of. So in terms of the overall committee report, to just provide some updates on 2 consultation responses, the Highway Authority have confirmed that, just to refer to previous comments made, and the tree officer has requested a tree survey and the retention tree retention and an arboricultural impact assessment. This is contained as part of condition number 11 already. So just referring to planning conditions. So the councils of colleges has recommended a further condition to be provided in respect of a habitat management and monitoring plan. So this will be added to any decision should the committee result to grant planning permission. So with regards to condition number 11, which is an existing ecological condition, the wording of this will be altered to require or it's recommended that it's altered to require that this condition is submitted, or the details to discharge the condition should be submitted prior to the submission of any reserve matters application rather than prior to commencement. The first bullet point of that condition is also recommended to be updated to reference British Standard 5837:2012 best practice. Bullet point 4 needs to be, or is recommended to be amended to explicitly reference paragraphs 5.2 and 5.3 of the updated ecological impact assessment. There are also updates to requested planning obligations within the Section 106 for the Section 106 legal agreement. So these reflect a response from Nottinghamshire County Council's policy team. So these figures have been increased to reflect changes in pressures or inflation. So the bus stop obligation to bus stop improvements has been increased to £27,600, and a secondary school obligation has been requested to be £181,620. There is no requirement for post-16 obligations, as there's a surplus of provision there, and the requirement for junction upgrades to Mansfield IDP remains unchanged at £52,430. An updated representation has been received from a member of the public who objected to the proposal on the following grounds: access infrastructure, the need for the ecological impact assessment to be updated. There was a comment relating to 5% affordable housing, but it wasn't clear what that was actually referring to. There was concern about impact on residential amenity. Local amenity and S106 payments need to reflect local need. The local infrastructure and services will need to be assessed to ensure that they can cope with new dwellings. And then it mentions the original plans are out of date. Just to note, all of these comments are either addressed within the committee report, and it should be noted that they will be reflected within the ecological appraisal that's been updated, or the S106 obligations. The original plans are unchanged. So for the presentation itself, this application relates to an allocated site within the Mansfield local plan. It's located in a residential area to the southwest of Balmoral Drive, in the northern area of Mansfield. The area is approximately 0.8 hectares. So to note to the committee, this application has been presented to the committee on 2 occasions prior to this, where it was resolved to grant planning permission. The most recent of this was in, or I think it was July or August 2020. The main reason for it being re-referred is the duration of time and to reappraise it against the current adopted local plan. But it should be noted to members that the policies that are included in the updated committee report were afforded significant weight during that presentation. So as stated, the application site is on a brownfield land that was formerly a nursing home. The main issue really for this is because all matters are reserved, it was felt that the principle is acceptable because it's an allocated site and all matters are reserved, so they would have to come back for subsequent permission at the reserved matter stage for appearance, scale, landscaping, layout and the access to the site. So the main issue really is to do with the impacts it was the impacts on biodiversity. So it's effectively being accepted to try and explain it in a way that sort of simplifies it. So because there's an issue with off-site provision of this site, there's been an acceptance that there would be some net loss in biodiversity on the site. This is anticipated to be mitigated by the suggested conditions, and the main issue really is whether it complies with policy NE2 of the local plan, which seeks to deliver net gains in biodiversity. But because the application was submitted prior to mandatory biodiversity net gain and the presence of the site being allocated, it was felt that this impact can be managed through the suggested conditions, and it wouldn't in itself be a departure from policy NE2. So the main issue here really is that although there would be a net loss, it's felt that the impact could be mitigated through these conditions. But otherwise, there's no real fundamental change to the assessment. It's recommended that planning permission is granted subject to conditions and the signing of a Section 106 legal agreement.
Thank you, Dan. There are speakers who've been accepted to speak on this item. So could I invite Paul Bell to the lectern? Just over here, Paul. If you can just turn your mic on, you've got 3 minutes when you're ready, Paul.
Right, thank you, Chair, and thank you for listening to our points of view. I've lived out in my house, which is directly opposite the gates, this proposed site, for 35 years. 35 years I have watched various animals frequent that site. You've got foxes, hedgehogs, bats, also it's a lovely home for them all. But that's not one of the main concerns. One of the main concerns is, and you will be well aware, that we're on the floodplain. My house, actually, where it was built, was originally a mini lake. How can I say this? Because on the back garden is a well, and it was put there by the builders to drain away water, all our properties, on that corner of Balmoral, as well as the private properties the side of me. Now that goes into a tank. Now that tank normally used to be emptied once a year. It's now got to a peak of 3 times a year. Severn Trent's well aware of the problem because they're already putting plans to build these ideas that they've got of brick buildings with soil in them and flowers to try and catch water. Well, when it rains, it runs out them gates like a stream straight into the great gate, the grate opposite my house. Now, when you've tarmacked all over that and you've built 35 houses on it, it's going to flow out there as bad as Water Lane. It's going to be like a river. The infrastructure cannot take it. We know this from Severn Trent. Severn Trent know that the sewers down there can't take it, because what happens at night at 10 o'clock, all the water they've held back off Millennium Park is released. You can hear it. You can feel it. So we've got a problem with that part of the infrastructure. But like people have said, under the National Planning Policy Framework, biodiversity and its net gain. Paragraphs 179 to 180. 9 dwellings or more lodge the measurable impact of biodiversity. We have a sanctuary there for wildlife. You're going to ruin it at a cost that could quite easily create some serious flood problems. That's before we start talking about the problem of perhaps, however you calculate it, 2.25, 1.75 houses each having a car. At the moment, we can't even get out to the bottom of the road quite a lot of times. And there should be a point there, because we come out on Debdale Lane, onto Debdale Lane, not a road, it's a lane.
30 seconds.
So police call our area, right, because of the problems and the Beirut. Councillors, I want you to look at this planning application and reject it, because at the moment we've got problems that we don't need. Now, I've always put the community first, even building the park, raising funds to build the park that the independents finished and pulled it down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Do members have any questions of the speaker? Yes, Councillor Jackson.
Ask you, Paul, to just explain what you mean by Beirut. What does that mean that they call
Right.
it Beirut? So I don't think I understand what that refers to.
John?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Right at the top end of Balmoral, you've got a situation where Bankery and all that lot come off. Well, because when the original planning was for all them houses, of which, you know, places for people, originally it was North British, but they've created a dead spot between there and where the open fields used to be, where the hospital, where the doctor surgery is. Now, the reason the police call it Beirut is because there's so much drug dealing going off up there. You can see the motorbikes, you can see the push bikes, you can see the cars coming up and with the phones picking up their orders. That's why they call it that. One of the biggest worries that I've got, we have no proper plan at looking at where all these houses are going to go. But I can guarantee if the tree line is kept, you're going to put a road at the back of that. If you're going to put a road at the back of that, you're going to create more dead spots. I was the chairman of Neighbourhood Watch for years. I patrolled that area. We had, with the police that used our neighbourhood policing, we had no drug problem. We've now got a drug problem. I'm hoping that the new administration that's taken over in government will stick to their rules and bring back neighbourhood policing. So once again, we can get back, because I'm 71 and there's a larger number of us well past 65, and we don't want to be intimidated, want to live as lives along with the wildlife in harmony. Hope that answers your question.
Councillor Swinscoe.
You, Chair, I just feel that I've got to say that I know Mr. Bell. Sorry, I didn't realise he was the speaker at the time. So, but I have got a question and it won't affect any decision. I've noted that you said that this well on your back garden is emptied 3 times. Do they physically come out with?
No, what it is, councillor, where the well is, right, there's pipes, a big pipe underneath the well goes to the road side there. You've walked around that area. Well, right there is Seven Trent's box. You walk on 3 big green plates. Those 3 green plates, actually, when they lift them up, that's where, if you like, the tank is, right, that they come and empty. And like I said, when we first came up there, they used to empty it once a year. Now it's going 3 times a year. But of course, rain has, you know, we're getting more of it, aren't we?
Thank you.
The Tempest Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bell, you've lived there quite a while by the sounds of it.
Yeah, 35 years, sir.
Am I right in thinking it was a care home on that land?
It was indeed.
before? Can you just describe what it was like for me, please?
Right. Right, when the care home was there, right, regularly at the weekend, we had to catch the old dears trying to escape. Trust me, it was a regular thing. mostly at weekends because they wanted to go and see their relatives. Because I've always been a community, we used to go up there at Christmas with 3 or 4 of the residents, and we used to sing carols to them. You know, they were part of the community, they were part of the community. They actually used to feed the foxes. It was quite funny because the little old dears used to open the windows and throw out some of the food to feed the foxes. In fact, they got very friendly with them. But it was beautiful. I mean, if you was to turn around to me today and say we're going to put a single story old people's hospital or home or whatever like it was before, I personally wouldn't have any objections. But that amount of houses on that, I do not believe passionately. Hey, we can't stand the traffic down the bottom, and we've got a lot of young ones now that seem to think you can go up that road at 50 and 60 mile an hour. I'm always frightened of a little kiddie getting killed, trust me, because there's no humps or out like that. But the only time we ever had any problems, and it was twice a year when the home was there used to be a guy come up with a big bus to take them out on a way, and he used to reverse all the way up. It was brilliant, straight in through the gates, never touched anybody's car. And then of course at Easter we used to have all the motorbikers come, right, to give them Easter eggs and everything else. We never had any trouble there. It was part of the community, it was respected by the community. It's like I said earlier, previous administrations disregarded that area, like when they pulled the park down. I was in the tenants of residence, and we spent nearly 2 years to raise the money to build a better park, which we did, and it's still there, and the young ones love it, and the mums and dads love it. I don't want all the hard work that we've done. I'm not getting any younger, so I can't do the things I would like to do. My mind's very active, but the body's started to fail a bit. I'm afraid it's getting near its MOT. I would hate for that community, all the work that we all put in, to go down the tubes, because I believe this planning would create not only environmental problems, welfare, much more importantly, the upheaval to do it and to properly put sewers in all the way down Balmoral. You ain't going to do that in 10 minutes. 35 years. I've loved it and supported it, and I'll fight for its. I'll fight as long as I can fight to make it the area that it once was. And we had the neighbourhood watch, and we had, the old beat bobbies. To get back to that, we'll see what happens. But I do believe that if you put more houses up there, you will create what the police have already termed Beirut. I hope that answers your question, because it comes from here. I've got nothing to gain, it comes from here.
Thank you, Paul. Do members have any more questions? No? Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee.
Next speaker down on my list is Councillor Alan Bell, the ward councillor. So Mark's just going to ask him back in. Thank you, Mark. Councillor Bell, if you want to turn your microphone on, you've got 6 minutes to do your presentation. Thank you.
to raise some issues and concern that our residents have. Millennium Court, I don't know, I'm sure we've got a picture of it somewhere. There are bungalows on Millennium Court. But the border will come right in front of them, and they're worried about their privacy, which is something we should all respect, because they're going to be, I believe, 2 and 3 houses, dwellings, and that, of course, house compared to a bungalow, it will overshadow their bungalows. One big concern we have is getting out of Balmoral Drive onto Debdale Lane. I spoke to Notts County Council on a couple of occasions, and they say, well, there's 2 means of access and egress. If they can't use Balmoral, then they could use Burlington. Well, my residents will verify, if you can't get out of Balmoral, then Burlington leaves a lot to be desired also. To turn right out of Balmoral is nearly an impossibility. You have to go, I did it on a regular basis, you turn left, you go down to Little Debdale Lane, turn round and come back the way you originally wanted to go. Well, that concerns me and concerns the residents with respect to emergency vehicles gaining access to Balmoral Drive. Another 35 properties allegedly going on, so double that. So that's 70 more vehicles coming out of Balmoral, 70 more vehicles in the way of an emergency vehicle. This junction is very close to Cheshire Road traffic lights. So it would be, for Notts County Council to decide, are they going to improve that? I would love to see that. I'm sure my residents would too. We have several vehicles that are also parked near the entrance to Balmoral Drive. I've raised this with Notts County Council, and I would like a site visit because that also makes things impossible. Loss of wildlife, the habitat birds and mammals on this side. As we're well aware, it's been empty. Well, the last one, I should say, the last thing was 2015. That's the biodiversity. Well, I spoke to Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, and they say that is valid for 18 months only. So we're way out of date with that. And if we look at what all the other things, it's all again 2015. I spoke to the highways, and they says, well, there's no need for us to go out. We've done an assessment in 2015. Well, I think we all agree there's been a lot of difference, a lot of changes since 2015, 2024. And that also stems with the ecological report. There's obviously diversity, the habitat has changed, and I'm sure the inhabitants have changed as well over that length of period from 2015 to 2024. That's where I'll leave it, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. There are no questions from members. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you. Do members have any questions of the officers? Councillor Swinskow.
You, Chair. Just to bring up the matter of the floods and the traffic turning onto Debdale Lane. I do know the area myself, and it is extremely difficult at times to turn onto Debdale Lane. You know, people are reliant on others letting them out, and an increase obviously it's not going to help any. The other thing is about the floods. I mean, I'm really concerned that they're already the 73 times a year. But however, I'm aware that there is a Severn Trent are doing the floods up Radmouth Way. Will that have any bearing on the floods, on drainage area?
Thank you. I think there's a couple of things with flood risk and drainage. So planning for I think the key thing to remember is this. So that the site would have been, when you allocate a site in a local plan, you appraise a site for based on material considerations, and one of those is, so planning looks at land use. So the site, I pulled in the when the resident was speaking, I pulled up the flood risk assessment and the flood map. So the site's in flood zone 1, which is deemed to be the lowest risk of flooding from the Environment Agency, and the purpose of planning is to drive development towards areas at the lowest risk of flooding. The flood risk assessment that was conducted does not, it states that all of the key drainage issues are low risk of flooding on the site. There is also a pre-commencement condition for an updated flood risk assessment and drainage strategy, and it kind of goes into all the provisions taking into account climate change as a buffer and everything else. So they would have to provide that before development commences. But the overall, I guess it's difficult when at this point we still don't have a full layout to go up, which will be the reserve masses stage. I think the general principle of looking at the planning constraint of the site is that flood risk is low and there are no known drainage issues. That's based on the Environment Agency's data. Cloud.
Members have any further questions? Just clarify something.
So in terms of flood risk, Dan is correct. It is flood zone 1, low risk. It is controlled via the condition, and we've got no objection from the local lead flood authority. So they're our main consultee in this regard. I think originally they did object, but then they wanted a flood risk assessment, which was submitted, and then they're happy that it can be dealt with by way of planning condition. And also to bear in mind, as Dan said, it is an allocated site, so the principle really of residential development is sort of established through the local plan process, which does look at a high level flood risk, strategic flood risk assessment. In terms of the traffic, appreciate, yes, Debdale Lane is busy. I used to live around there anyway, and it is difficult turning right there. But I have again spoken to the Highway Authority today, and they said very similar to what Councillor Bell's just said in terms of the dispersal of the traffic coming out of the site can go two ways. So it's very difficult. They consider that the site. They consider that the site is actually a fairly small site, and obviously the test of highway safety is one of severe, has to be a severe impact, which they don't think this development and the scale of development would cause a severe impact. That's the Highway Authority comment, and obviously, again, as with flooding, they're our main consultee. They have no objections to the application subject to the planning conditions. Bear in mind as well, access is reserved as well, which is slightly unusual because you normally have access determined with an outline, but in this circumstance it's going to be reserved, so the actual details of the specific access will be subject to a reserved matters application.
Councillor Hammersley.
Yeah, my question is related to the resident's comment about what I think he's describing as antisocial vehicle behaviour and drug dealing, and we don't have any police consultation. I just wondered why that hadn't been thought.
Thank you, Councillor. I think so. There's a couple of things here. I think the difficult thing at the moment is that the site, obviously, the site is vacant. So, generally speaking, a vacant site with no organic surveillance from residents on there would be more at risk of antisocial behaviour than we have at the moment. I think generally speaking, Nottinghamshire Police would be more likely to get involved at the reserve matter stage because they look at when you don't have, so the principle of development for 35 houses is the principle. At the moment we're looking at sort of the high level stuff, just the principle of housing on the site. When it comes to when we can see the layout, scale of dwellings, where they would be located, that's more likely the time when Notts Police would get involved, because they generally try, it's an optional standard, but they will look at the principles of what's called secure by design, which is security on dwellings, but it's also trying to ensure that you effectively avoid sort of what's called like inactive frontages, where you have blank walls or you have areas of a site which aren't overlooked. I think at the moment the other site is completely it's completely vacant at the moment, so it would be felt that there's a greater risk because there's no real overlooking onto the site at the moment. There's a thick belt of trees, as you can see on the, that's looked to be retained, but there's no organic surveillance within the site, so we think it'd be a betterment, and they would be consulted at reserve matters. Thank you.
Any other question? Councillor Hammersley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll come in this time. Question to Claire about the highway. Claire said it's the highway issues is a matter for reserve matters. It's very unlikely that a site for 35 dwellings would lead to a significant change at the junction onto Debdale Lane. It's unlikely, from my point of view.
That was the advice that I got from the Highway Authority today. Just to reiterate that in terms of the highway safety, it's the access that's actually reserved. So if there was a wider highway safety issue, I do think that would need to be addressed as part of the outline to a degree, because obviously you can't secure any Section 106 agreement through reserve matters. But I have no evidence before me and from our statutory consultee that suggests that they would want anything. There is the strategic transport contribution, which is in the Section 106 obligations list, and that's obviously for the Highway Authority to to work out where that's going to be spent. But yeah, it's the actual principle of it's the access that's reserved, and actually the sort of technical access. But there's nothing. I spoke to them today about yellow lines, and I spoke to them about doing something with Debdale Lane, but they were fairly clear to me that they didn't see that there was a necessity for this scale of development.
Councillor Answer.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm also very familiar with that area, which live close by, but there was a permission granted in 2004 and then again in 2008 for 39 houses in that instance, and asking for 35. Can you assure me that the whole of this application has been reassessed all the way through it? In other words, all the various findings within that report, is it the same today, or has there been some significant changes from 2008?
Thank you, Councillor. I think so. The reason, so as I kind of stated before, so this application has come before. This application has had so it's this same application was submitted in 2015. It's come before committee twice before, where the resolution was to grant permission. The reason for it coming before the committee again tonight is a reappraisal against the current. So my committee report goes into in some detail the relevant material planning considerations that go into determining an application such as this. I think the key thing is the current Mansfield. So the current Mansfield local plan, which was adopted in 2020, allocates this development for 35 houses, approximately 35. So the description of development for this is up to, so they can't come in for more than that. I think sort of the key sort of issues, flood risk, ecology, drainage, highways, principle of development on the site, that my committee report goes into all of those. As far as the principle of getting 35 on a site like this, it is fairly high density development, but it's not, I think generally speaking, as far as major development goes, scale is reasonably small. You can get, larger urban extensions go up to hundreds or even thousands of houses. So I think there's no reason but to answer your question, there's no reason before me, with the exceptions of the matters dealt with in the report, as to why that overall figure has changed. Do you want to add anything if I've missed?
I don't think so. I think, you know, you're going back to like, 2004 and then 2008. They obviously are historic applications, and then they would have been carried through to the local plan. So we had obviously that would have been we had the 1998 plan that they were assessed against, and then this allocation was carried forward into the 2020 plan. So I think it's been a fairly steady allocation. It's always really either had a planning permission or it has been an allocated site. And I think the appraisals have been done. And that's shown really from bringing it to planning committee. I mean, this has been now 3 times. It's far from ideal. I agree. It's, the 106 should have been signed sort of 3 or 4 years ago, but it wasn't. So we have a duty, as we're making a decision now, to bring you up to date with current local plan policy. And that's what we've done by assessing it against the current local plan.
Members have any further questions? No one's indicated. Thank you. Would I ask for a proposer and seconder for this application, please? Councillor Hammersley. Seconder. Councillor Tempest Mitchell. Now in debate mode. Do members have any comments on the application? Comment? Thank you. With that, we'll move to the vote then on show of hands. Those in favour of the recommendation contained in the report, please show. Any abstentions? Any against? It's unanimous. So the item number 4, outline planning permission with conditions, sign of section 106 legal agreement, Balmoral Drive, outline application with all matters reserved for 35 dwellings. The 2015 0083 been granted. That's subject to the 106 agreement being signed. Thank you. I'm going to move on to item 5. Councillor Bell come back in. I will leave the meeting and Councillor Hammersley will take over.
Good evening, everyone. Moving on to application 2024-0424 HHA. If you'd like to present your report, Howard, thank you.
Thank you. So this application is a resubmission of a previous application that was referred to the June Planning Application Committee this year at the request of the Chair of Planning Applications Committee and was refused. Accordingly, the Assistant Director of Planning, Growth and Major Projects considers that this resubmission should be considered by the Planning Committee. This is an application seeking retrospective planning permission for a number of alterations at number 103 Sherwood Street. This includes the roof remodeling, dormer to the south facing roof, and the openings at first floor and second floor levels. The proposed dormer would be finished in a charcoal grey boarding. The main material difference between the proposal in front of us this evening and the proposal that was refused under the previous application is that the window at second floor level to the rear portion of the property on the south elevation that will be serving a bedroom will be a fixed window with a top opening only. The previous proposal was refused on grounds of detrimental effects on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties and character and appearance of the area by the committee. In terms of impacts on residential amenity, given the approximately 10 meters distance separating the proposal from number 107, the closest residential property to the south, it is considered that the proposal would not result in an adverse impact by way of overbearing or overshadowing to any of the neighboring properties. Since the determination of the last application, the new windows on the south elevation has all been replaced with frosted glass and restrictor installed to one of the bedroom windows at second floor level. The other bedroom window has been replaced with a fixed window that has a top opening only, as you can see on the right hand side of the photo on the screen there, and then the window on the left is the one with the 100mm restrictor installed. A photo record document has been submitted and some of the photos can be seen here now. Given the level of obscuration and the limited degree of opening, it is considered that the proposal would not offer any views into the neighboring properties that would unacceptably harm the privacy of the neighbors. It should also be noted that similar obscurely glazed windows were approved as part of the extent application. Turning to the impacts on character and appearance of the area, it is acknowledged that both the proposed dormer and the proposed roof remodeling would be visible from the front elevation. However, the ridge of the property as seen from front elevation would only be approximately 0.4 meters taller than the existing house, while the proposed dormer would be set in from the east by approximately 0.4 meters as well and would be located on the side. This photo shows the front and the side elevations of the property. The property is also set back a significant distance from Sherwood Street, and there will be an approximately 11-meter distance separating the property from the boundary of the site connecting to the public street, which is considered sufficient to minimize the impacts of the proposal upon the visual amenity of the immediate street scene. This photo shows the property from a distance. Here's a series of photos just showing the property and is formulated by a combination of photo taken along Sherwood Street from north to south. And if we can go to the next one, please. Yeah, so this is then a static photo taken further away from the site. It is acknowledged that the proposed roof design differs from the approved roof design and that the dimensions of the proposed dormer would be larger than the approved dormer. However, the front porch, first floor rear extension, balcony deck at first floor level to rear, spiral staircase to the rear of the balcony, screen fence to the sides of the balcony, and render finish as submitted within these applications are closely identical to the extent development approved under a previous application made in 2020. It is considered that on balance, the cumulative visual impacts of the proposal would not be sufficient to warrant a refusal in this regard. Therefore, the office's recommendation to this application is to grant planning permission subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard, for your report. We've got one speaker, Chris Orwin, the agent. Thank you, Chris.
Evening, Committee.
You've got 4 minutes, Chris, from whenever you
Thank you.
choose to start.
So I just want to reiterate what the case officers highlighted to you, that my client has on previous occasions tried on several occasions to engage with adjacencies, some successful, some non-successful. The original approved scheme through construction resulted in several amendments being made during construction. Form of a lower ridge line, increased dormer length, projection and length of the dormer, and the position of windows to the south elevation. An application was made earlier this year to capture these amendments and was submitted and subsequently rejected on the grounds of detrimental effect of residential amenity of neighbouring properties. citing both planning policy 6 criterions A and B and policy 7 criterion A. So to address each of the criteria, whilst the dormer to the south elevation has increased in length and depth, being contained to the rear of the development, it was felt that the original ridge line should be further reduced. The original agreed proposal in height so that the impact and character of the dwelling was minimised. Impact and also impact to the street scene, wider surrounding areas. This has been backed up by the photographic evidence that's been submitted and has been shown on screen. Criteria B, to prevent any reduction in residential amenity to adjacent occupied properties. All the new windows on the south elevation have been installed with frosted glass. As you can see from the picture, the highest level was installed so that there was no visual impact to the adjacencies. The only opening window is to the west end of the dormer, which opens up towards Sherwood Street. So there is no views back to any of the residential properties along the eastern section of Sherwood Street. The rear balcony will also be fitted with frosted obscure glass to a height of 1700 mil, ensuring that no residential amenity is lost to the properties to the south. Again, photographic evidence has been provided. The occupiable properties adjacent to 103 are not immediately adjacent and are located some 11 metres to the south of the development. Therefore, there is minimal impact on overshadowing from the development. In tandem with the frosted and obscure glazed arrival space of 103, every effort has been made to mitigate loss of amenity to properties on the eastern side of Sherwood Street. Chair.
Thank you for that. Any questions from members of Planning Committee to Mr. Orwin? Thank you, Mr. Orwin, for your presentation. Any questions to officers from members of Planning Committee? Councillor Tempest Mitchell.
Just one. In terms of size, has anything changed from last time?
There are no change in terms of size when you compare this application to the application that was presented to Planning Committee in this year.
Do we have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation? Seconder. Councillor Bell. Debate mode. Any questions in debate mode? Can we go? Sorry, Councillor Tempest Mitchell.
Just that one thing that we turned it down last time, I think, because of the size. Residents that have lived there for decades came and said it's just too big, it doesn't fit in, both in looks and generally in size. And as Howard's just told us, nothing has changed in terms of size.
Yeah, I think that's right in terms of size, as Howard said. Just to point out, there were obviously two main elements of the reason for refusal that was provided by the Planning Committee. One was residential amenity, and which has been sought to overcome by changing the window designs. And the second one was the character and appearance of the area. So it was, I think it was mentioned before, didn't it? So I appreciate what you're saying, but obviously just to reiterate, just having a look that members would have to be satisfied about defending any appeal in terms of character of the area, and obviously whatever the committee decide in terms of their voting. But yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
Councillor Swinscoe, please.
Yeah, just following on from what Councillor Mitchell has just said. It's just highlighting the opinion of the local planning authority last time says the virtue of its design and bulk is out of character with the existing street scenes, thus having a detrimental effect on the character and appearance of the area. So apart from a change of windows, can't see any difference with the bulk side of it, and it does look, doesn't seem to fit nicely with the building itself, the dormer at all.
You, Councillor Swinscoe. Councillor Moxon.
Yeah, as Councillor Swinscoe and Deputy Mitchell just said, it seems that the only main change that's been made is that they've frosted the glass, and that whilst that was part of the reason why we rejected it previously, that wasn't the whole reason. And I think it only goes part way to actually resolving that issue of the privacy anyway. So I really don't see that there's been any fundamental change to what's been proposed.
Can we put it to the vote? All those. Oh,
I just have a duty to obviously say, and I know members have heard it before, but obviously in terms of defending appeals, the reasons must be fairly robust. And obviously you have the risk of costs if it does go to appeal. I just have to point that out. It's just sort of my professional conduct. I have to say that to you, that the officer recommendation is to grant. I think you also need to just bear in mind the actual extant planning permission that's on there, because it has got planning permission for a dormer on that side as well, which we pointed out last time. So.
Deputy Mitchell.
Just to clarify, so I've got it right in my head, dormer that was built didn't fit the planning permission that was given.
No, that's correct. So fully understand and appreciate what members are saying here, that the second part of the reason for refusal, in members' opinions, is probably going to be the same. But when you're looking at appeal situations, an inspector will look at what has planning permission, and then we'll put that in the balance of how much worse that is, if that makes sense. So it will look at what has got planning permission, and then we'll look at how much more of a detriment this is compared to we call it a fallback position. So compared to the fallback position of what could be built. So it's just weighing up that difference of what's got planning permission and what's been built. Just on the screen there, that's.
Yeah, thank you, Kurt. Can we put it to the vote? All those in favour of the recommendation? It's just one in favour. Oh, two, sorry, two in favour. All those against the recommendation? Refusal is the same as last time, if members agree with that. Same as last time. Do we need to go around each member? Who's voted in for and who's voted against? Yep, please.
It is the opinion of the local planning authority that the proposed development will have a detrimental effect on the residential amenity of the neighbouring properties. Furthermore, the proposed development, by virtue of its design and bulk, is out of character with the existing street scene, thus having a detrimental effect on the character and appearance of the area. The proposed development would therefore be inconsistent with Policy 6 in brackets criteria A and B and policy P7 in brackets criterion A of the Mansfield Local Plan 2020.
Councillor Swinscoe, so the reasons are the same if officers can note that. Thank you. Apologies for that. We need to have another motion for everyone to vote that it's been refused, apparently. Oh, a proposer for the refusal. Councillor Tempest-Mitchell and Councillor Bell. All those in favour of the refusal? Six in favour of the refusal. All those against the refusal? One against. So just to reiterate, planning application 2024-0424 stroke HHA has been refused planning permission. Thank you.
Won't be a minute. I move on with item 6 on the agenda, which is planning application reference 2023-0703 CLU retention of the public house sui generis on the ground floor and 4 number apartments on the first and second floors, including a new dormer window on the front elevation and external alterations. Could I invite the officer to make the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So just as was described in the description of development, so this application is for the retention of the former public house, what would be on the ground floor of the Pheasant Inn, just shown on the site location plan here, and the upper floors of the former public house will be converted to residential use, just as there's a series of elevation and floor plans. Just to show it here. So the general, so most of the changes to the application site would be internal, although there would be an additional dormer on the front elevation. I think there would be various minor external alterations to the building. So just to note on the location of the development, so it's the Pheasant Inn, the former Pheasant Inn pub. So it's located to the north of Mansfield Town Centre with access off Chesterfield Road south. It's about 5 minutes, just 5 minutes walk from the council chambers, so relatively close by. The application was referred to planning committee due to the number of objections, not due to the number of objections received. It was due to the interest of the chairman of planning committee referring it to tonight. So just to go over the main considerations here. So the application was previously refused. That was primarily due to the whole site was proposed to be converted to residential. So it was felt the primary principal policy, which is IN7, has a presumption against the loss of community facilities. In this instance, the ground floor would be retained as a public house, with the upper floors being converted to residential. So on balance in this application, it was felt that the overall principle of development had been that principal reason for refusal had been overcome. Turning to the other consideration, so from a perspective of visual and heritage assets, the overall, showing some photos here, so the overall the overall changes to the exterior to the external elevations of the former public house would be the creation of a new dormer on the front elevation, which would be where I'm hovering the mouse there. But no objections been received from the conservation officer, and it was felt that was acceptable. In terms of highways safety, so the parking provision would remain the same. So for the public house and the residential dwellings would use effectively the same. Show you on the plan here. So there's 19 parking spaces would serve the proposed public house, and the residential flats, which the highway design guide states there would be a requirement for 1 parking space per bedroom of the 1-bedroom flats, and then the 2-bedroom flat would require 2 parking spaces. So given the number of parking spaces available, it was considered that was acceptable. There would be the provision of 4 electric vehicle charging spaces and 1 disabled space with the proposed development, and there would also be the provision of 8 Sheffield style cycle spaces on site. So just to show, so that's the kind of style of cycle parking that will be provided. There's also a bus stop close by, so public transport is an option in this area. As far as, so there have been some objections. The objections primarily focus on amenity grounds, so this has been covered in the officer report. However, just to note, so with the exception of that new dormer on the front elevation, the building would make use of existing openings, and there is a primary separation distance of approximately 25 meters from the nearest residential dwellings. So in terms of general overlooking privacy concerns, it wasn't felt that would create an unacceptable harm to residential amenity. there are also conditions recommended in the officer report on construction working hours, a construction phase environmental management plan, and there are also details of extraction and ventilation to be agreed, as well as a condition controlling the recommendations of the noise impact assessment. On the amenity of the proposed residential apartments themselves, they would all meet the nationally described space standards, with the exception of the 2-bedroom flat would be 7 square meters below. But having assessed the space of the rooms, it was felt that all of the rooms themselves had an adequate degree of amenity space, and that it wouldn't have a detrimental impact on balance to any future occupiers of that unit. So, subject to those conditions in the report and the assessment, it was considered the proposal is acceptable, and the recommendation is to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. As referred to, the Pheasant Pub was a much loved public house, and like most public houses, has been failing now some years to earn a decent living. When the application first came in for the whole pub to be converted, I think the Planning Application Committee refused it. And this came to me as a delegated decision. I felt that it needed hearing in committee where members had free rein to ask questions and get answers. But as the report says, the main problem of retaining some amenity has been solved by retaining the ground floor of the pub as a public house. So that I'll open up for members' questions, because there are no speakers. Do anybody have? Councillor Swinscoe.
Thank you, Chair. I do like the idea of having the flats and retaining the pub below. Are there any safeguards? I've noticed on the report, sorry, that it does say that there's been no active, nobody's not actively tried to get any tenants for the last few months for the pub. So are there any safeguards in place for, for them not somebody saying, right, I'm just not going to bother, and then putting an application later on to turn it into flats?
Thank you, Councillor. So the principal policy when it comes to a public house is considered to be a community facility. So it's to do, so you need planning permission. So to answer your question directly, there's nothing to stop somebody saying, say they try to run a business and then they say it's not viable. There's nothing to say stop them coming back in for a future planning application, but they would have to demonstrate through empirical marketing exercise that pub is not financially viable, and that there's criteria within policy IN7 for the protection of community facilities. So in this case, though, because the use class of the ground floor pub is what's called sui generis, which is a class of its own, they couldn't just convert the ground floor to resi without a further planning application. But we can't. There's nothing in planning law that prevents a submission of a further planning application, but it would still have to be assessed against the relevant policies in the local plan, if that makes sense. I don't know, Claire.
It does, thank you. Can I just, will you be monitoring that they are being proactive in trying to encourage?
The only time that as case officers we can get involved is if they were to submit a planning application to say, they say they came in for the change of use of the ground floor to residential. The only time that we could really get involved in that would be to say you need to prove that this is that the business is not viable against policy IN7, and as was stated by Councillor Weston, the application, and I stated in my presentation, the application was when they tried to convert the whole pub, the application was previously refused on that basis, so they would have to prove it. As far as business decisions, that would be a private matter for any future tenant and the landowner. It's not something we can really get involved in beyond what the local plan kind of allows us to, if that makes any sense. Thanks.
Any further questions, Councillor Hammersley?
I'm a little bit confused about the parking provision. If the ground floor is going to start back up again as a pub, What if it becomes a really successful one? And all the punters going into the pub, parking that car park, where are the residents going to park?
So this was something we have discussed, and I think it is a valid point. I think the general principle, as was with the previous application that was brought where highways was raised, the principal consultee that we consult as case officers is the local highway authority, and the highway design guide, which states that they have standards for parking standards for both commercial parking, residential parking. So I think this was an issue we discussed. I think the difficulty is though is that we don't have an objection from the highway authority, and I think it was felt as a general principle that the impact on highway safety wouldn't be unacceptable and there would be sufficient parking. If that's an issue for members, if it's something that I don't know if we can maybe further management plan. So I think it was so if members recall, previous applications have come in, we have had conditions on them for like a parking management plan to come forward. So that could take the form of, say, reserved spaces for residents could be a potential thing. But I think as the recommendation as it stands, it was obviously we go off the comments from the local highway authority. So we are mindful when imposing conditions that we try to sort of keep them to just what a view of officers is that what is absolutely necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. But obviously that's a recommendation that it's the purview of the committee to make to review that space, because as I say, it's not an unreasonable question.
Any further questions? No one's indicated. Thank you. Could I have a proposer and seconder for the vote? Councillor Hammersley, Councillor Swinscoe. Can we have a vote by show of hands? All those in favour of granting? Do you require the extra condition? Can we have a vote on the recommendation as per the agenda then? All those in favour, please show. Any abstentions? Any against? No. That's unanimous. Thank you. So, planning application 2023-0703 COU. The retention of the public house sui generis on ground floor and 4 number apartments on the first and second floors, including a new dormer window to the front elevation and external alterations. It's been granted planning permission with conditions. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7, which is the Appendix 1 Human Rights and Appendix 2 Use Classes. Can I confirm that everyone's read them? We have a show of hands to accept them. That's again unanimous. Thank you. And the final item on the agenda is planning appeals decisions at item 8. And there were no appeal decisions received during this period. That was the 16th of September to the 13th of October. So with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. Have a safe journey home. I think it's been raining rather heavily. Thank you.